With the aid of the Dark Lord Sauron, posing as Anatar, an emissary of the Valar, the Elves of Eregion crafted 16 magical rings, while another 3 were forged exclusively by their leader Celebrimbor. When they were completed, Sauron traveled to the fires of Mount Doom and made his masterwork, the One Ring of Power, one ring to rule them all. Believing this was the key to conquering Middle-earth, Sauron gave it immense power by imbuing it with part of his soul, thereby linking his life force to the One Ring. Placing this creation upon his finger, Sauron expected to gain mastery over the elves wearing the lesser rings, but they immediately felt his dark presence, removed them, and thereby resisted his influence. His plan of failure and identity exposed, the Dark Lord confronted the elves, demanding they surrender the rings. When they refused, the armies of Mordor slaughtered their people, capturing Celebrimbor as he fought a last stand alongside his warriors. Finding 9 rings of power, Celebrimbor revealed the location of the other 7, yet despite suffering excruciating torture, would not give up the final 3. Eventually he was shot full of arrows, and his corpse used as a banner for Sauron's army, when it fell upon Elrond and the Elves of Lindon, sent by Gil-galad to reinforce Eregion. Unfortunately, they came too late, and would have also been massacred, if not for the dwarves of Durin's folk and the elves of Lorien, who attacked the enemy from behind, distracting them long enough for Elrond, his warriors, and the survivors of Eregion to retreat north. With their allies saved, the dwarves and elves pulled back into the Misty Mountains, behind a powerful gate which could not be breached. Having fought to honor their friendship with the Elves of Eregion, Durin's folk also provided a safe harbor for any refugees who came to their mountain and helped them get into the east where they might settle in Lorien. For these acts of courage and loyalty, the dwarves paid a terrible price, as Sauron made Khazad-dûm a permanent target for the orcs, leading to many years of war and forcing them to largely remain isolated within the safety of their mountain for the rest of the age. Despite this setback, Sauron went ahead with a new plan, gifting the 16 lesser rings of power to 9 human kings and 7 dwarf lords, hoping their minds were more susceptible to his corruption. Though the dwarves proved too resilient and did not succumb to his will, the rings did contribute to their eventual downfall, as it made them increasingly greedy and reckless in their pursuit of wealth. Yet of all the children of Ilúvatar, none proved more susceptible to corruption than men, with the 9 ring-bearers becoming powerful sorcerers, who slowly turned into the Nazgûl, ringwraiths loyal to the Dark Lord. Although his prized creation failed to accomplish its original purpose, so much of Sauron was put into the One Ring, it became his focal point, augmenting his natural abilities to ensure he was as powerful as possible, while allowing him to survive any harm to his body or spirit, so long as the ring survived. But at the same time, should he be parted from it, he would weaken significantly, and were it destroyed, the Dark Lord would also perish. Leading the remnants of his army and the survivors of Eregion north, Elrond established the refuge Imladris, which soon became a great elven stronghold, with its leader named Vice-Regent of all Eriador, second only to King Gil-galad. Yet this new center of elven power was not enough to turn the tide of battle, and as the war of the Elves and Sauron continued, the Dark Armies conquered nearly all of the Westlands, save for Imladris and Mithlond, which were held under siege. Yet just as the Greyhavens were set to fall, the ships of Numenor came into the harbor, bringing forth a mighty host to drive the Dark Lord into retreat. Though Tar Telperion was reluctant to involve herself in the affairs of Middle-earth, her nephew and heir, Menastir, at once answered the call for reinforcements sent by Gil-galad in Lindon. Sending the commander Kiriatur with a vast army and fleet, he split their forces in 2, sending half to defend the Greyhavens, chasing the enemy east to defeat them again at the Battle of Sarn Ford, while the rest of the Númenóreans landed at the mouth of the Gwathlo River, cutting off Sauron's retreat and defeating him once more. Finally, with his armies all but destroyed, the Dark Lord was attacked in the east of Kalinardan, left to flee back into Mordor, broken and humiliated. In the north, the orc army surrounding Rivendell was trapped between the warriors of Elrond and Gil-galad, bringing the elves victory against the Dark Lord, though it came at a high cost, with many of their people killed and their lands utterly devastated. When Tar Menastir inherited the scepter from his aunt in 1731, he set out to secure western Middle-earth from further invasion by establishing permanent settlements, guarded by their ships and soldiers, which might work with their allies, the elves. However, his son Tar-Kiryatan had no love for the Eldar, and when he took charge in 1869, dedicated his reign to expanding their imperialist power, sending ships to sail and colonize every corner of the world, establishing coastal colonies which demanded tribute from the peoples of Middle-earth. Middle-earth. It was under Tar-Kiryatan that Numenoreans started to deride the Valar, resenting them for the ban placed on sailing westward, as no mortal man was meant to set foot upon the Undying Lands. Some even argued that because they were now a mighty people, they should be allowed to voyage west and be granted immortality. Since the elves of Tol Eressëa often sent ships to visit and trade with Numenor, the Valar soon heard about what was being said and sent messengers to try and persuade them away from these dangerous notions. However, the Numenoreans only grew more stubborn and hostile, causing the elves of the Undying Lands to stop visiting, and when Kiryatan's son, Tar-Adûnakhôr the Great, inherited the scepter in 2029, matters only grew worse as he furthered their imperialist policies and vitriol against the Valar. Adûnakhôr became the first king to refuse abdicating in his elder years, and instead ruled until his death in 2251, when he was succeeded by his son Tar-Ankalaman. Under Ankalaman, those loyal to the growing imperialist mindset of Numenor began to heavily populate the colony of Umbar, while those who remained faithful to Eru, the Valar, and the Elves founded the city of Pelargir. In 2386, the king died and was succeeded by his son, Tar-Telemaite, who was then followed by his daughter, Tar-Vanemelde, in 2526. Throughout much of her reign, her husband ruled as regent, and so when she passed in 2637, he usurped power, taking the name Tar-Adûnakhôr and ruling until his death 20 years later. Nevertheless, their history books did not count him as an official king, and so the next true ruler was his son, Tar-Alcarin, who reigned until 2737, when his own son, Tar-Kalmakil, inherited the scepter. Tar-Kalmakil was the first king to record his name not only in the traditional Quenya of the Elves, but also their own language, Adûnakhôr, calling himself Ar-Balzagar. In 2825, his son Tar-Ardaman took power, known also as Ar-Adûnakhôr, who was then replaced by his son in 2899, the first king to take the scepter with a title in the Adûnakhôr language, rather than Quenya, named Ar-Adûnakhôr, meaning Lord of the West, an insult directed towards Manwë, king of the Valar, who shared the title. Under his rule, Quenya was banished from Numenor, and only the faithful, led by the Lords of Andúnir, remained in contact with the elves. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like youtube.com/SoulGuideMedical, Lord Tarax Zoron, Ty Gillian Fraser, and Fred Heartless, Knight of Iron and Ice. If you'd like to help CivilizationEx, click on the Patreon link, and please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to see more.